Good morning. We will make a start on the Performance and Overview Scrutiny Committee meeting. It's Wednesday, the 22nd of November, for those who may be joining us online at a later stage. And I welcome everybody in the chamber and those who are joining us online, councillors and committee members who are joining us online, and indeed some officers. We'll start, if we may, with apologies for absence. And I think we've got Councillor Bond, who is sent our apologies, and also Councillor Pavia. Thanks, Hazel. Item 2, declarations of interest. Have we any, Hazel, that have been notified? None of those. Item 3, public open forum. Any issues arising there? None. And so we'll move on to item 4, which is month 5 budget monitoring. Thank you, Councillor Callard, as Cabinet Member Joint Cabinet Member for Finance and Resources, for joining us this morning. And we have also the Chief Officer and the Head of Finance to join us in the chamber. It's an important report. It's a report, however, I'm concerned is of month 5, which is taking us to the end of August, which is effectively 3 months ago. And I think I just wanted to register the concern that for Scrutiny to be doing its job in our council, let alone any other council, we need to be focused on as current information as possible, and 3-month-old information around the state of finances is clearly a concern. It's slipped. We were working to what appeared to be working very effectively in terms of a summary report at an earlier stage. Month 6 we had to schedule for next week, but we then had to cancel because we were informed that that information would not be available to us. So we actually had to cancel the Performance and Overview Scrutiny Committee meeting last Thursday because of this. And we won't be looking at month 6 until January, when we're in the final stretch before we'd be into the new year. And I just want to register the concern that in a year where there are already some very clear challenges for the financial oversight of the council, that for Scrutiny to be able to look at this and do its job effectively, I'm concerned that that information is significantly not as current as we would want it to be. But within that context, could I ask, I don't know if Councillor Callard, you wish to provide some comments initially and pass to Peter or to Jonathan, but over to you.
Comments specifically regarding the delay in the month 5 report being brought, Chair, or to introduce the month 5 budget monitoring report?
I beg your pardon, sorry.
Would you like me to introduce the budget month 5 monitoring?
By all means, please do.
Thank you. I'm presenting today for Scrutiny the month 5 outturn report. The purpose of bringing this report is to provide the committee with an update of the progress Council's revenue budget for the 2023-2024 financial year as forecast at the end of month 5. Part of this contains the budget recovery plan, which addresses an increase in non-budgeted costs from the 2023-2024 budget. For context, and I'm sure this committee will remember, in late July, the Cabinet was made aware of an increase in the in-year budget pressures. These additional pressures are summarised in the table 3.11 in the covering report, and further details can be found in Appendix 1. The Cabinet requested that officers respond to the situation to bring us back on track, and following some thorough work by our officers, we've brought forward the proposals detailed in Appendix 3. The Cabinet will continue to monitor our performance against these proposals to ensure that these savings are delivered. So I invite questions on the report, and I don't know if you'd like to add anything, Peter.
Thank you, Councillor Callard. And thank you, Chair. I'll maybe pick up your point latterly, I guess, just in terms of the one of both the timing of the month 5 report been received by the committee. I guess also the general point, and in terms of the subsequent meeting of the committee being, I guess, postponed and into January. But I guess just as a general overview, I think if we just reflect and take ourselves back to late July, when Cabinet received its first, I guess, update, and in terms of the in-year position, Scrutiny considered that and I think acknowledged the extent of the challenges that the Council was facing at that time. And clearly, and subsequent to that, it highlighted the ongoing work that was needing to be done, the recovery action that was going to be required to arrest the in-year situation. And probably just to sort of echo that fundamental point, that we absolutely have to bring the in-year position back into parity and within budget. Acknowledging that point around reserve use and utilisation. We've taken that conscious decision with Cabinet to increase the level of reserve funding to support the in-year situation. That was taken as part of the report back in July, but clearly that highlighted a gap still to be met. And obviously good work has been ongoing and subsequent to that, and that is now reflected in this month 5 report. This is not easy, and you know, it's required an awful lot of work, you know, across departments, through leadership and with Cabinet, and to, I guess, find the right balance, such as to ensure that we've taken very thoughtful decisions, and in terms of where cost can be contained, costs can be reduced, and obviously to bring us back within budget. And to all intents and purposes, that's what the month 5 is showing us. I think it's probably just important to point out as well, and I think that was acknowledged in the most recent discussions of the committee, the strengthening of some of the sort of internal governance arrangements. You'll see, and within the report, the introduction of, I guess, a vacancy freeze, and I'm sure, as needed, we can talk about that further. But that sits as just one of a number of levers that we've introduced. We've introduced a financial management board, which is comprising of senior finance officers, the chief internal auditor, and at times other officers as well, and as needed, so that we can maintain very tight scrutiny and oversight of the progress that's been made on the ground. It's probably just important just to highlight that the oversight of that board is not just specifically there to look at the in-year position. It is also there to work as part of, I guess, the evolving budget process, and looking forward and into next year. But hopefully that gives the committee at least some assurances in terms of the increased rigour that we've introduced. So that's probably it for me, really, and just in terms of the report itself. Just in terms of the timing, the month 5 report, yes, I think acknowledged, and just unfortunate, I think, just in terms of the production and preparation of the report. The reason that we were pressed was because of the fact of the extensive work that had to be done around the budget recovery action, bringing that through alongside the updated forecasts, and obviously working with Cabinet to gain their comfort that the measures that we were taking were the right and appropriate ones. That did squeeze, I guess, our normal reporting timeline, and it led to a situation whereby we would have hoped to have got this report, and I think that was the original intention, to get this report through as pre-decision scrutiny. Clearly the report you're getting now is post-decision because it went through Cabinet a couple of weeks ago. But unfortunately, that was just as a result of where we were with timing. So I think I acknowledge that point, just in terms of timeliness. What I will highlight is that not just through the increased governance arrangements that I've talked to, but we are providing regular and monthly update into Cabinet informally, and in terms of the progress being made, and what we're seeing on the ground in terms of forecasts. I think to the extent that we had any further levels of concern to introduce, then I guess we'd give consideration to any further level of reporting. But I'm probably in a position, I think, where I don't feel that's necessary. I think the month 5 report highlights, I think, progress that's been made to address the situation that was reported back in July. The deferral of the meeting, which was, I think, scheduled for the 29th, I think it was, of November, which was due to receive, I think, 3 reports: the asset management strategy for scrutiny, the financial strategy, and the month 6, pre-decision scrutiny of month 6. For differing reasons for all 3 of those. The timings are such that we're not going to be in a position to bring that in on the original intended date. And the reality of the situation, I think, is that as I'd communicated to the chair late last week, that we're probably going to be needing to source a date in early January in order for all 3 of those reports to be received again. And I appreciate it is post-decision scrutiny that's taking place. And unfortunately, I think the timing of Christmas is slightly unhelpful, because I think it just takes us back probably a couple more weeks than needed. I'll maybe just offer to John just to offer any supplementary comment, I guess, because I think in the essence of the report that you've got today being called a month 5, at the point at which the report was produced, John, it would have taken note of all latest information. So in a way you could call it a month 5 plus. And I think similarly, it'll be the situation with the timing of the month 6 report coming together, and that's likely to be a month 6 plus, in the sense of it will take on board the latest available information. So hopefully that's just sort of helpful in both responding to the initial comments that you made, Chair, and just giving the committee just generally a bit of context, I guess, in terms of the report that they got in front of them. So thank you.
Jonathan, thank you, Peter. Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. Just one final point from me. I think you're absolutely right, Peter, in terms of that information coming forward. And when the final report was drafted, it would have captured anything significant that we knew about at the time. I think just one final point from me is just in terms of that in-year action that we've required services to engage in bringing back some of that in-year deficit. I think we just need to recognise the effort and the work that's gone into that from services. Clearly, as finance teams, we only have so much ability to direct and coordinate that work, and it's we heavily rely on services and the officers that work in them to engage in that and deliver on it. And that's no mean feat in terms of that £2 million figure that's within the report. So I think we need to recognise that. What it does do is increase the overall savings target for the year to just over £12 million. So that's significant when you compare it to our overall budget. And those governance arrangements that are in place now are going to be important for the oversight of those as we continue through the remainder of the year. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Jonathan. And just before I open this for questions, just on the comments that we've just received, thank you, and the assurance which I was listening very closely to the comments made, that there doesn't appear to be any significant reason to advise us of any significant change to the plan to come in a balanced way by the end of the year, and that's a reassurance that I, and I'm sure committee members welcome. It is important to note that we will have gone through, by the time we get to a mid-January report on month 6, which will be 3.5 months old information at that point, we will have gone through a 6-month period, never looking at information that is any earlier than 3 months old. And it's not, in my view, respectfully, acceptable to be indicating that those members who are in the cabinet are being updated on the situation on a regular basis, but actually the wider council and residents through the Scrutiny Committee are not being in anything less than 3 months. And that is a real concern. This is all our council, and we all have an interest in that, as do our residents, and we need to be able to look at timely information to be able to make assessments of this. However, a point made about that, and the reassurance is very welcome. I'm going to open this for questions. I see, Councillor Buckler, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, I'd just like to say the cancelling of next week's meeting has caused some confusion, and not only to me. I know Councillor Pavier had to give his apologies today because he thought today's meeting was cancelled, and I thought the same thing, which, you know, begs the question of how well prepared we are to scrutinise these reports properly. So I'd just like to say that it has, you know, it has caused confusion, and if we could avoid that in the future, that would be good. What I'd like to hear from Councillor Callard is what responsibilities in these reports is his, and what are his job share cabinet colleague, Councillor Rachel Garrick, because we need to be clear of what you have been involved with and what Councillor Garrick has been involved with. The pressures on providing accommodation for those people and families that find themselves homeless are clearly increasing, and the costs involved seem to be reactive, such as repairing damage by tenants and raising rates of bed and breakfast accommodation. Are there plans to try and mitigate this and be more proactive in stopping it before it starts, really? And there are shortfalls in social care and health because of complex demand and children and young people with ALN provision. What are the implications for users of these services? What plans are in place to manage these factors? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Buckler, and appreciate your limiting questions to 3. If you have any further questions when we've received questions from everybody, then do please raise your hand again, and I'll see if there is an opportunity. But yeah, passing that over, Councillor Callard, did you want to address the first of these at least?
Yes, Chair, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Buckler, for the questions. My responsibilities in the job share that I have with Councillor Rachel Garrick are medium-term financial planning, budget responsibilities. Councillor Garrick retains responsibility for our asset management strategy, for our HR and for our IT systems. So the details contained in this report fall under my side of that portfolio rather than hers, which is why I'm here presenting to you today. I hope that explains that for you. And regarding the second part of your question, we do have Jane Rogers on the call. I don't know if she'd be the best person to come in and answer that.
The second question was in regard to repairs, etc., repairs and maintenance concerning homeless people and the housing related to that. So who would like to respond to that? Peter?
Thank you, Chair. I'll just come in initially, and I think I'll just hand across to Chief Officer Francis O'Brien. So just for Francis's benefit, I think, and if I understood the question correctly, I guess there was a suggestion that our efforts were probably more in the space of being reactive than proactive in the sense to responding to homelessness. I know Francis will be well placed to be able to provide clarification on, I guess, circumstances which will ultimately be a need to be reactive in certain circumstances. But I'm sure equally, Francis, you're going to be able to provide comfort on the proactive work that we're undertaking. Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Great. Well, so Francis, I'll come to you in a second, and then I'll come to Councillor Griffiths, who I also see wishes to come in and respond to the question. I'm assuming Councillor Griffiths. But first of all, Francis.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Francis O'Brien, Chief Officer for Communities in Place. So with regards to homelessness and the housing repairs and maintenance, we have got and taken on some more and increased leasehold properties, and we have seen increased repairs and maintenance being required within those leasehold properties, which extends beyond the budget that was allocated for that. With regards to current homelessness numbers and the demand that's coming in, thankfully we're starting to see the demand diminish, which is really good news. And our main purpose is obviously to try not to have many people within bed and breakfast accommodation for any extended period of time and moving them on into temporary accommodation. So moving them into temporary accommodation and leasehold properties, private sector landlords or other temporary accommodation will mean that there's associated increase in repairs and maintenance when people move out into more suitable permanent long-term accommodation and we have to go in and undertake the repairs and voids. Thank you.
Thank you, Francis. And Councillor Griffiths, I think you wanted to come in response to this question.
Yes, I raised my hand as the cabinet member with the responsibility for housing. Most of what I was going to, information I was going to provide has been provided by Francis O'Brien. It is pleasing to note that the numbers of people in bed and breakfast has now begun to decline. Relating to Councillor Buckler's question, we can trace that decline to the preventative measures which have been in place for some time. I think the most useful thing would be for me to ensure that committee members following this meeting are provided with trend information on bed and breakfast, and that'll assist in understanding the financial implications of that.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And the third question from Councillor Buckler related to shortfalls in ALN. Peter, did you want to respond, or Jonathan?
You've got Jane Rogers on.
Okay, Jane, I think you're being passed the question, Jane Rogers.
Thank you, Chair. I think I will be responding to the question that was raised regarding the complexity of presentations within adult social care within the context of high demand and the implications for people on the implications for people who require social care. So I mean, we're coming at it from both that response and the preventative perspective. When people do present with complex needs, the usual processes for assessing in an integrated way and developing care plans for people remain as ever they have. What we're trying to do in terms of the response to the financial circumstances that we find ourselves in is to make sure that we have our re-ablement pathways really robust and better developed, so that when people are coming in with complex needs, they're not going straight into long-term packages of care, but that they go through a period of assessment and intervention which tries to enable them to live as independently and as well as possible in the way that they choose for as long as possible, thus delaying and reducing the need for longer term care.
Thank you, Jane. That's very helpful, and it relates to quite a number of different issues in terms of budget pressures. So it's helpful to have that explanation. I'm going to move on to, and thank you, Councillor Buckler. I'm going to move on to Councillor Strong, who has your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've got three questions, two of which relate to social care and the third on a totally different matter. First of all, on social care, on page 22 of the report, using the PDF numbers at the top, the report indicates a target of, excuse me, of 550k savings in relation to continuing healthcare. On month 5, we're at 141 achieved, which seems to imply that we're falling a bit short of target. And I really want to ask in relation to that is, you know, we seem to have something of a power imbalance between MCC and the Health Board. And in connection with that, are we actually doing enough to equip our staff, our social workers, to challenge the positions taken by the Health Board through perhaps extra training or discussions with advice from senior management, or are we, as Naib Evan would have said, sending our social workers naked into the conference chamber? So that's the first question. Secondly, on page 25, and I think, Jane, you might have partially answered this already, we see the quote there, budget recovery measures are being enacted, including increasing the oversight of all new packages of care against tightened eligibility criteria. Now, in our meeting last week, the joint one with the People Committee, we saw that we'd had the hours of unmet care reduced from 2,000 to 800, which seemed to be a great success. But in the context of what I just read out, you know, is it actually that reduction was that we had more carers and more hours provided, or is it that people who in the past would have qualified for care packages are now being ruled out? And if that's the case, are we not failing to serve the most vulnerable people, which is part of our corporate plan, part of our responsibility? I hear anecdotally, again, in relation to what Jane said, that whereas in the past, with the smaller care packages, social workers would get those dealt with simply through discussion with a manager. Now those sort of packages are going to full panels, and social workers have been tied up for hours on end in these panel meetings, with implications for their ability to be out there on the front line doing frontline social work. So two issues there, if I can. And the third one, totally different, quick clarification, I think, in relation to Castlegate Business Park. It states there, it states in relation to the leisure park that, you know, we made some money, but not as much as we hoped. But in relation to Castlegate, it only refers to the overspend. Now, 111,000, is that an actual loss, or is that just that we're making some money, but it's just not getting as far as the target? So a bit quick clarification on that, please.
Thank you, Peter. Peter or Jonathan, did you want to pick up on either of those?
I think if we pick the third question up laterally, Jane Rogers will cover the first two.
Okay, so Jane, would you be able to pick up the first of these, which is the savings against continuing healthcare, the target savings, and against actual 550 against 140?
Thank you. I will pick up on that first question. Just a note to clarify why we identified that 550 target in the first instance, and we'd collated the cases that we felt were either currently in application for continuing healthcare or in dispute, and that was that figure that we came to. And we've only we're only showing, as you would expect, what we've already got over the line against the savings target. And indeed, it is. It certainly feels, from a social care perspective, that it is a power imbalance between ourselves and health when we're going into negotiations. But we have built up over recent years a level of expertise and confidence in the way that we challenge our continuing healthcare applications. And we have in place both a local resource through a dedicated worker and access to a dedicated regional resource. And both of those, well, there's 3 people altogether, 2 regional and 1 local, are there to support staff members going through the continuing healthcare process to construct their arguments, to support them in panels, and to generally provide advice regarding the process and eligibility. One of the reasons that we feel very held back is the length of time that some of the challenge processes can take, and that extended time of debate and going back for more evidence and so forth can really slow us down. But in answer to your question, Councillor Strong, we have put in resource to support workforce people going through, taking people through the process, and have provided regular training and development opportunities for workforce members who are in that process. And of course, we've got our direct relationships with health that also assist in trying to unblock problems, but we are still we've still got a way to go in terms of getting some of the cases that we feel are eligible for continuing healthcare over the line.
Thank you, Jane. And could I ask you to just address the item on page 25, which is the budget recovery related to the unmet care reductions?
Certainly. It's not a straightforward answer, as you would probably expect, so we'll try and keep it succinct. So I think we are feeling that the reduction of waiting hours for home care, reducing from approximately 2,000 to approximately 800, is actually on balance more of a success story than anything else. Part of our high waiting times were the fact that we just didn't have the care to put in place. But over the last period of time, increased care provision has been available. But I would say that there is, in all honesty, we are at the same time going through a process of reviewing existing packages in care and making sure that when new packages of care are stood up, they are stood up at the right levels. But this is an ongoing balance for us. And it speaks to the point that Councillor Strong was making, that we are over our entire county with the 3 different geographical areas using panels to try and really make sure that we are using resources in a fair and equitable way against what are now coming to be understood as a set of eligibility criteria which are applied equitably across the council by the different people, the very many different people who are involved in assessing the care and support needs. So this does mean for some people that there may be a reduction in what they've had before, or that when new packages of care are set up, they are maybe not as hefty as perhaps they would have been in previous times. But what I would reiterate here is that it's done on an absolute individual basis, case by case, taking into account the whole circumstances of an individual situation. And it's turning again to the point that I made earlier about the proper use of reablement and strength-based approaches for people that try to mobilise a person's individual strengths, resources, assets, and community strengths resources and assets to provide the care and support that a person needs without reliance on long-term packages of care. So it's a constant balancing act for us. And the point that was made around the use of panels, I think, again, I'm sorry to hear that workforce feel they're tied up with hours. I'll look into that a bit further. My understanding is that it's the leaders and managers within the service that are tied up. And this is part of it's unavoidable for the time being, because we're trying to have a deep level of understanding around how we're allocating our resources. And that means really communicating with each other at a granular level of how care is provided. And I think without that, it's going to be very hard to move forward in a sustainable way. And what I would say, my experience of these sorts of whole system changes, that at the beginning it feels slow because it's new, and the ways of talking to each other about individual people are new. But as people get more accustomed and the changes that we require get more embedded into practice, it becomes a much quicker and easier, sort of slicker process.
Thank you, Jane. And could I ask Pete or Jonathan to respond to the Castlegate question in terms of the 111,000?
Yeah, just to clarify, so the £111,000 that's referred to is a shortfall against the budget. I think just to provide a degree of context, I guess, around Castlegate, I think members of the committee will know and understand, this is public knowledge, just in terms of, I guess, Mitel as the then anchor tenant, obviously looking to step back and away, and I guess the efforts that have been made successfully to obviously work with remaining existing tenants who have been keen to expand within the footprint of Castlegate, and the introduction of additional new tenants. So we're in a state of transition, but it's positive. And in terms of the trajectory, we are seeing, I guess, a degree of, and again in context, a degree of a small shortfall in year. I think the important point, probably just to highlight, which is important context, is that based on the agreements that have been reached, and where, for example, rent-free periods have been agreed with new tenants, or expansion within the existing demise, that'll take us into a position of having positive return in 24-25 next year. Hopefully that's just helpful clarification.
Yep. Peter, sorry, Councillor Strong, did you want to?
Thank you, Peter, for that. And just also thank you to Jane for somewhat complex answers for a complex situation. I do appreciate that, and just say I'm sure on this side we share your frustrations with the situation, particularly in relation to continuing healthcare. So many thanks for your input, and I'm sure your report next year, when we come to look at it, will contain some more information about the new processes that are being used. So thank you.
And just to add to Councillor Strong's comments, Jane, if the performance and overview scrutiny committee can assist in any way by, for example, looking for colleagues within Nairn and Bevan to join us for a meeting to understand how they're actually applying continuing healthcare, if that would be helpful, let's put it on the forward plan. But we'll take that under advisement, perhaps from yourself, because we wouldn't want to get in the way of that, but it would be to enhance the understanding, not to damage the relationship, that we would be doing that, of course. So I see Councillor Howells with his hand up.
Thank you, Chair. My points were on items 312, budget saving targets, communities in place. So there's why has there been a delay in resourcing the team to meet the 177,000 energy reduction targets, and how quickly can we hope to see the energy costs being reduced in line with targets? And on the same item, the 3112, the 100,000 shortfall in the mileage reduction with the delays on the rollout of the pool car scheme. Is that now being addressed? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howells. And yeah, would you want to pick up, or Francis pick up the first of these? Okay, great. So Francis, over to you on both those questions.
Thank you, Chair. So with regards to the decarbonisation team, that was agreed as part of the budget process last year, and the team have been developing out the job descriptions, job evaluation and team structure for that. We were due to commence the recruitment process just as the recruitment freeze and moratorium on vacancies has kicked in. So what we have progressed with is the recruitment into the energy officer post and recruitment into some business support and project support into the team, and we are currently holding the decarbonisation project officers at this moment in time due to the budget pressures. With regards to the mileage reduction, we are working with a contractor and going through the procurement exercise to get that appointed. There's been some issues with regards to the framework that we were intending to use to appoint them, and we've had to go through a different route to do that, so there's been a delay there due to the procurement exercise. But we are hoping that that will be launched by the end of the calendar year, and there will be cars allocated across the county to start to roll that out. Thank you.
Thank you, Francis. Moving on to Councillor Fuchs.
Diolch yn fawr, Chair, and thank you for going through the papers, Councillor Callard and Peter. My question relates to page 27, around homelessness. I just wanted to make a couple of points and ask a question. So one thing that has really concerned me in terms of my ward recently, I met with a group called Reach Out, who are trying to support someone into accommodation out of kind of B&B into single bed premises whose kind of base was very much Monmouth. And it turns out there's absolutely no available single person accommodation in Monmouth. And I just wanted to flag that. And I know there are budgetary pressures, but I do think we need to try and resolve that, because when people are recovering from addiction, it's really important they can stay within their own where they've got their networks of support. So I just wanted to, I understand the huge pressures we're under with homelessness, but I think it's really important that we try and build up that accommodation in every town. And then I wanted to talk about the housing support grant that's mentioned, because I visited my Monmouthshire, sorry, I'll say that again, Mind Monmouthshire last week, and I was really interested to hear all the services they provide, some of which are funded by a housing support grant. For example, their work with farmers, trying to help farmers and their mental health, which is a really unique project. And also their work in schools, such as with Monmouth Comprehensive, with their work supporting children's mental health. And I just wanted to say that it's extremely important that the housing support grant continues to be allocated to these amazing charities that we have in Monmouthshire, like Mind. They gave me an example of their added value. So for 18,000 given to them for the housing support grant, that brings into the community and to Monmouthshire £72,000. So that's a huge multiplier effect. And I just want to say I would not like to see any decommissioning of this service or any reduction in the housing support grant going to these charities, because actually they save us money in the long run at Monmouthshire County Council, because they are preventative, they signpost people on to the right services. And so I'd just like an assurance, because I couldn't really understand in the papers whether there is going to be a reduction in the housing support grant. and I'd like assurances that there isn't, and that we're doing all we can to make sure that there isn't, and that the charities that support us so well are not impacted. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fuchs. I think the first of those was more comment than anything else in terms of reach out in Monmouth and the importance of us having accommodation in supporting those who need the support at a local level. And I think that's something I'm sure, Francis, you'd be taking under advisement because we would all share and echo that point. I think if I could just ask you to address the funding regarding HSG, the Housing Support Grant. And did you want to pick that one up, Francis, as well? Okay, over to you.
Thank you. Yes, and we'll note the comments made around the single person's accommodation in the north of the county, in particular to Monmouth. With regards to the Housing Support Grant, that's a grant that we've received from Welsh Government, and we are still awaiting confirmation from Welsh Government about the funding allocation that we will receive next year. With regards to this grant, it is a very much valued grant and one that we would love to have more of. We have had and met with the director in Welsh Government with regards to the Housing Support Grant last year to seek confirmation that this is a grant fund that will continue, because as Councillor Fuchs rightly mentions, it supports and provides such a large amount of the preventative agenda that is so critical to our housing and homelessness work. So it isn't a grant that we have control over, but it is something that we are very, very concerned if it were to be reduced. Thank you.
Thank you, Francis. Would that we had control over external grants. That would be a happy place to be in. But, you know, thanks for the clarification, and that's work ongoing. I'm sure you'll bring that to our attention when you have a clarity of that. And thank you, Councillor Fuchs. Moving on, Councillor Buckler, I see you've got your hand up. Do you have a further question that you wish to put?
Yes, thank you, Chair. What's the latest indication on the likelihood of the unbudgeted grant of £1 million being awarded? It seems sort of unsatisfactory that promised funds are just not materialising from Welsh Government, such as adequate funding for universal school meals for primary pupils. How is this being followed up, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Buckler. And Jonathan?
Thank you, Councillor. I think there's two separate issues there. So I guess in terms of our unbudgeted assumption within the forecast, I think as we've mentioned in the report, as we go through the year, that's going to come with a high degree of risk. But I think what we have found, since the time this report was put together, is that there's indications we will have ability to passport some core costs into grant streams that are coming forward. So we're working with colleagues in Welsh Government to define how much of that is possible and take that through into the next forecast that's going to come through. Clearly, Welsh Government have got an in-year budget issue, which they've been reporting on and significantly supporting the NHS and transport during the year, but have continued to support local government. So we have to be aware of that, and I guess aware that perhaps some of the larger funding streams that we've been accustomed to over the past few years, certainly, during the pandemic era and just past it, may not be to the scale that we are expecting this year. So we have to be mindful of that. I think the other issue turns into the additional responsibilities that are being passported, primarily around policy change in the area of free school meals, universal free school meals, and homelessness. And I think we've had reassurance from the Chief Officer around the homelessness space that progress is being made in that area, and our kind of processes and procedures behind that are bearing fruit in terms of being able to accommodate those people presenting in more suitable ways for them, and both in a more cost-effective way for us as an authority as well. In terms of the universal free school meals, we're in continued dialogue with officers in Welsh Government around that, and we're hopeful of a satisfactory resolution which hopefully allays some of that pressure that we're seeing coming through in year. It's a fluid situation, as you'll appreciate, given Welsh Government's in-year budget pressures, but we're hoping to get some confirmation on that quite shortly, and we can bring committee a further update on that in due course.
Thank you, Jonathan. And I see, Councillor Fuchs, you have your hand up. Was it in regard to Mind Monmouthshire, Councillor Fuchs?
Yeah, it was just to follow up on that point, the housing support grant. I note that Francis O'Brien said we met with the director of that area last year, but I just wondered if it was worth sending a letter to them reiterating how important it is that we should know as soon as possible what's happening with that grant, because the longer it goes, the more difficult it will be. So I just wondered if it was worth pursuing that. I just wanted to come back and say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fuchs. Now, again, I'll ask Francis to consider that one outside the meeting. I don't think it requires a response at the meeting, but certainly a positive thought to just reinforce how important that whole area is. I just have a couple of questions myself, which I want to just put, if I may, before we move on. So the overall month 5 forecast is indicating a pressure of 124,000. However, if you look at the actual services overspend, the forecast overspend is 6.2 million, and the recovery against that brings it down to 124,000, are met by non-service related items, some of which I think would be potentially in the category of one-offs, but they are appropriations, they're financing, they're corporate costs and levies, they're the grant assumption of $1 million that Councillor Buckler raised, their budget recovery plan assumptions, and I think I just flag up the question that we're being presented with information from 3 months ago that shows savings, shows overspend by the services of 6.2 million, with those items recovering them, and we would most certainly be, I would certainly be expecting plans to be brought forward such that we'll be able to look at those before, well in advance of next year's budget discussions, that we can understand what the plans are to address those underlying overspends within the services. If I could flag up just the question on page 8 of the cover report, which is on schools catering, where £2.90 per meal is identified as not sufficient. It may be in there, apologies if it is, but I can see it. What is the actual cost such that we would be looking for that to be retrospectively funded by the Welsh Government? Schools' balances are, as far as my numbers add up, they will be down within year by 86% from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. Given the challenging nature of next year's budget that you've advised us of, that would seem like a very significant exposure for next year. So just really flagging that one up. And if it's possible just to address those before we move on to the next item. Peter, did you want to come back on those?
Thank you, Chair. I think just to assist in terms of the coordination, I think if I cover the first point off, I think on the matter of the schools catering, I think Francis will probably be best placed to respond, and I'll take a steer, I guess, from Will McLean, Chief Officer, as to whether he or, in fact, Nikki Wellington, the Finance Manager, looks to make comment, I guess, in terms of school balances. I take from your comment, because it was a comment more so than a question, but I guess you're looking to draw some comment from officers, I guess, in terms of your observation.
That would be helpful. If it's an inaccurate observation, please do advise.
That's okay. Okay, so you're absolutely right to highlight both the extent of the in-year pressures, the gross pressures that we're obviously seeing, and that are extending beyond the budget that was set back in March. And you're also correct in highlighting, I guess, the recovery action and the nature and form that is taking. It probably won't be a huge surprise, and in the way that we've needed to react and respond, back to my opening comments around the situation that was reported back in July, and the ability for us to obviously push further in our recovery action. I use those comments in terms of being very thoughtful. It's a conversation that we had to work through with Cabinet, and look at the realistic options that we had to really arrest and contain expenditure, such as to bring things back in line with budget. So yes, they are significantly one-off in their nature. But just to sort of maybe just pick up on the point that I think you alluded to, Chair, that an expectation may be that plans to address those gross in-year pressures, that they should sort of come forward ahead of the budget for next year. I think they are fundamentally integral to the budget process. So if I maybe just step forward just that one cycle of Cabinet. So this month 5 report went through Cabinet a couple of weeks ago. And a week ago, and a week subsequent to that, a report went in and that provided an update on the Council's circumstances, situation, context around the budget challenge for next year, and I guess the process that we were working through to look to address that. One of the fundamentally important parts of that is to recognise the recurrent nature of an awful lot of that overspend pressure that we're currently seeing. But equally, the equally important work that needs to be done in terms of identifying the means and the ways that we can look to reduce and mitigate those pressures, so that we don't have the full extent of that impacting next year. That is just one aspect, that is one facet of the work that we are ultimately doing. And clearly, the report that went into Cabinet highlights, the extent of the budget shortfall. It will be about mitigation of pressures, but it will also be around identifying savings proposals that looks to bring us back on course. And just to reiterate the point again, in terms of reserves, I've made this clear in responding to questions that I've had through scrutiny and elsewhere. My advice is that we're not in a position to be able to look to extend further in terms of reserve utilisation to assist the budget for next year. That makes our challenge ever so much more difficult, I guess, for next year. However, and fundamentally, it's the right thing to do because we need to bring the Council's finances back on a sustainable footing. It's work necessary. So I think that deals with the first question. I think maybe, Chair, if I maybe just pass across to yourself if you want to bring Francis in to deal with the second one.
Thank you, Peter. And just on that, I think you make the very important point, and it lies behind some of the concern I've just expressed, that reserves having been utilised for this financial year. You've made that very clear that previously and again now, that we cannot rely as a council on being able to dip into that to balance the books next year, and my reference to having an understanding ahead of the budget plans was having an understanding to what is being done this year to actually bring the forecast overspend into balance for those very reasons, that by the end of the year and by the time we move into new budget planning, reserves would not be something you would want to touch, and we would not want to carry an overhang into next year, which will have challenges of its own. So thank you for clarifying that. And moving on then to Francis on schools catering and the question around the £2.90 per meal and the reference points in the report that this didn't cover the cost of meals. Are you able to clarify what the cost that we're looking to recover retrospectively from Welsh Government, Francis? Thank you.
Yes, okay, thank you, Chair. So the cost per meal for Monmouthshire, based upon its current uptake, is in the region of £3.30 per meal. Dependent then upon the variations we will see in uptake across our schools. So obviously we've rolled out universal free school meals in September, so we would like to see uptake increase. That number can vary. So some of the sensitivity analysis that we've been doing to that budget modelling is that it's going to be within a region of £3.30 up to around £3.45. So it's in that region, Chair, but £3.30 for this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Francis. That's very clear indeed. And I don't know if Nikki wanted to address the point of schools' balances and just really the concern. Again, if the number is correct or not, please do clarify, Nikki. But my numbers show a decline in year from the beginning of the year to the end of the year of those school balances of the order of 85–86%. If you could confirm that, but also just how that might be dealt with moving into the following year.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so I'm Nikki Wellington, Support Services Manager for CYP. Yeah, you are right. We are seeing a huge reduction in our school balances. Just be mindful of that. Included in those balances is our pupil referral service, and that sits within there. And we're seeing a significant pull on the balances of the pupil referral service. The number of pupils are increasing significantly to that service, and therefore the costs are going up. But in all the rest of the schools, you'll be aware. Obviously, the schools have had significant grants from Welsh Government to recover from COVID, and they have been asked to spend those grants. So while we are seeing a significant reduction, schools are doing what they have been asked to do in terms of spending those grants and ensuring that they are spent correctly and to support those pupils. It will create concerns for next year, and it's just something that we need to be mindful of as we move into that budget process. We are communicating with our schools at every opportunity to say, to maintain balances where they can, and working with schools that are in a deficit to bring a recovery plan to the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. Recognising really how challenging the situation is, and I'm sure that their awareness of that is going to be very important for them to form next year's budget too. So we've been asked to scrutinise the revenue budget forecast for 23-24 up to month 5, and as part of that to assess whether effective budget monitoring is in place and the extent to which budgets are spent when the agreed budget and policy framework, and including the reasonableness of the explanation for variances, and consider the achievement of progress to meeting budget savings targets. I believe we've thoroughly done so, and therefore I move the report, and we move on to the next item on the agenda, which is Strategic Risk Register, item number 5 on the agenda. And I would invite, I think we've got Richard Jones. Thank you, first of all, to the officers who attended this part in regard to month 5 budget monitoring. And welcome Thank you also to Councillor Callard. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Callard, as the joint cabinet member, for attending. Hi, Richard. I'll just give Richard Jones and Hannah a chance to settle in to the desk up front here. And if I may ask you to perhaps outline the strategic risk register from the point of view of assuming that we have read it, but you may want to pick out particularly key issues. Thank you, Richard.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Richard Jones, Performance and Data Insight Manager at the Council, and joined by my colleague Hannah Carter, who's also contributed to updating the report and the strategic risk register in front of you today. So the purpose of the report is to provide you with an overview of the current strategic risks facing the authority and how they're being managed. Your role as a committee is to oversee and scrutinise the management of strategic risks in the Council. And to do this, you can use the risk assessment to scrutinise risk owners on the management of the risks. I'll just briefly, Chair, just highlight a bit about the background of the risk assessment, its purpose, and then cover some of the key changes to it, as you suggested. So a reminder that strategic risks will largely affect the Council as a whole. Typically, these will be risks that jeopardise the Council's ability to achieve its objectives or provide operational services as planned. The risk assessment covers high and medium level strategic risks. And therefore it will not cover every risk facing the Council. It will be those high and medium level risks to the Council's strategic delivery, and then we have a range of other arrangements in place in order to manage other risks within the Council as well. The risk register is a regularly updated document. It's informed by a range of information that flows within and into the organisation during the year and is regularly updated based on this latest intelligence. In addition to the risk register, we've also provided you with a brief summary of the risk management process in Appendix 2 that guides how we manage strategic risks. I just want to also draw the committee's attention to the addition of numerical scores for the risk levels we've added. So these are aimed at better demonstrating changes in risk levels following our assessment of risk likelihood and also risk impact. So moving forward then to the risk register itself, provided in Appendix 1. We're conscious it's a detailed document. It's managing some complex strategic risks in the organisation. So to support the committee, we provided a summary of some of the key changes to the risks at the start and also updates on risk levels. So just to draw the committee's attention to some of those more recent changes in the nature of the risks the Council is facing and how it's managing them. The first risk on the register has been adjusted to focus on the risk to the Council's ability to deliver all its commitments in the Community and Corporate Plan as a result of the current financial position and wider economic climate, and also an addition of a further risk around timely and appropriate decision making. A further update has been made to the risk level on the Council's financial sustainability. This reflects risks related to the initial budget model shortfall into 24-25 and some of those issues you've already scrutinised in the earlier report this morning. Also, there's been an adjustment made to the nature of the risk related to educational attainment. The changes reflect both the progress made in mitigating the risk around implementing the new national curriculum for learning and also the increased emphasis of the risk on the delayed impacts of the pandemic on learning through reduced attendance levels and worsening behaviour in schools. The replacement local development plan risk has also been redefined into 4 parts to ensure the risk of the Council not progressing with the replacement development plan are clearly captured and mitigating actions identified. And also further, a reduction in the risk level related to the provision of homelessness accommodation has been made following the progress in delivering the rapid rehousing transition plan, again as you've already had updates on this morning. And then finally, just to highlight to the committee the addition of 2 new risks to the risk register recently. One risk reflecting the possibility of material reduction in public bus services in the county, which may occur as a result of diminished funding for bus operators from Welsh Government. And finally, a risk identifying the risk of legal challenges to council decisions and service delivery through legislative routes. So that just hopefully gives you a flavour of some of the more recent updates to both risks and risk levels. Just for the committee's awareness, the report will also be presented to Cabinet in December to review the current strategic risks facing the Council, and also an overview of the process in place to manage strategic risks will be presented to Governance and Audit Committee in December as well, reflecting their role in providing assurance on the risk management process. And I'm sure they'll be working closely with you, Chair, and the committee to understand the links between the two reports. So just finally, to bring it back to the recommendations, the report provides an overview of the current strategic risks. Focus of your role today is to identify any further risks you would wish to scrutinise with risk owners, and also, given the nature of the document, it may provide further areas you want to explore as part of your work programme, and also where you may identify the nature of the risks or the elements of the risk may require further follow-up with other committees, which you may want to coordinate as well as part of your role of overseeing the wide range of risks the Council faces in the Strategic Risk Register. So that's hopefully a helpful summary, Chair, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Richard. And question from Councillor Buckler.
Thank you very much, Richard, for that. What I'd like to ask you is the categories of risk: high, medium, etc. You know, high we have 16, and then also high 12. Could you clarify for residents the categories and what they all mean? Also, the fact that you've got this new risk about legal challenge, can you explain why this has been added? Thank you.
Yeah, so start with the risk levels. So we recognise that in order to manage risk effectively, it's really important that we have clarity on the levels of risk within the Council. So in Appendix 2, we've set out both the updated risk matrix and the definitions of what we describe as a high, medium, low level risk. So we base that on assessment of a 4x4 matrix, looking at both risk likelihood and risk impact. So the likelihood of something happening ranges from unlikely to almost certain, and the impact of that ranges from minor to major. And then the risk matrix shown there shows you where those fall in terms of becoming a low, medium or high level risk. But to briefly summarise for the committee and residents, you know, if a risk is high, it's highly likely to occur, and the impact will be major, and therefore, you know, we need to have tight risk controls and mitigation in place to manage that risk. If a risk is of a medium level in nature, it's unlikely to result in a major issue. However, if it did, the impact could be significant. Obviously, proportionally lower than the medium level risk, but still qualifies for inclusion in our strategic risk register as a significant issue we need to manage and monitor. And then low level risk are those that we assess are unlikely to occur, and or their impact may be moderate, but nonetheless we may have some risk control levels in place beyond the strategic risk register to manage that, perhaps through service-based level risk management or other information in place. So hopefully those definitions help, but I agree the question is really helpful because it's important we have that shared understanding of what we mean by high, medium and low level risks and how they come about.
And the legal challenge, Richard.
And the legal challenge, yeah. So that's been added to the register, recognising that in liaison with colleagues in legal services, we have potentially seen an increase in challenges. There's a range of legislation in place that means that our service delivery is governed by, and then in order to live within that legislation, it's important that we be legally compliant, and there are routes through which resident service users can challenge us, and particularly adding to why it's been added as a strategic risk. was reflecting that, in the current financial position we face, we're going to have to make some difficult challenges and choices as a council. And those challenges and choices, whilst the mitigation actions about how we implement and ensure that those are robust in terms of taking account the legal implications of those and the impact of them, it has been identified as a medium level risk going in, particularly into the current budget round, to ensure that we are taking those appropriate mitigations to reduce that chance that some of our decisions may be challenged through legal routes.
Thank you, Richard. Moving on to Councillor Fuchs. And I think you have a question, Councillor Fuchs.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So reference risk number 12 on the risk register. So I note it mentions under in the more detailed tables underneath that we're doing, there's the cost of living discretionary payment and a couple of other things regarding mitigation. But I'd like to just ask when the next poverty working group is and when the last meeting was held, and how we're progressing on our poverty action plan, because I think there are some good individual interventions stated here in the risk register, but I do feel that we also need a more overarching look at poverty reduction. We know the cost of living crisis is biting really hard, so I would like to see perhaps more on that in this report, or an update on it if possible. So that's my question. And my comment would just be, having analysed risk registers over the years, I just find it really helpful if they can be RAG rated as well. So could we possibly have red highlighted in red? I know it's you may think it's a minimal point, Chair, but it would help us all when we're looking at the risk register, and any members of the public looking at it, if you could see highlighted in red where you've got a high just in that square, because it does draw your attention to the risks that we face that are the biggest ones. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fuchs. I absolutely share the view that the more we can make, it's quite data heavy, and the more we can unpack it and make it something that is more readily read and understood. If I could just add, I think RAG rating, which I've absolutely asked for other tables in previous meetings, would be a good thing to standardise across the council in terms of reports of this nature. But also trajectory. I think it would be very useful to have an arrow that indicates, upwards, holding still, or moving downwards, because again, it gives us a reference point. So it's something that's rated as red. Is that something that has previously been green, and vice versa? So I think those things would be very helpful. So thank you for the suggestion. Can I ask that, Richard, you take that away and see if that could be built in? But on the first point, Councillor Fuchs asked about the cost of living discretionary payments and interventions relating to poverty.
Yeah, and thank you for the suggestions. I think we're supportive and looking to develop, as well as feedback from Governance and Audit Committee as well, about how we can ensure there's clarity of how we present our strategic risks, so that everyone's clear on both the risk levels currently and changes to those. So we'll take those on board. I think the specific question was around the poverty working group, which is something I'll have to take back to responsible officers and get back to the committee about the next meeting. But I think in terms of the wider point around managing that risk and the actions the council's taking to address poverty in the county, obviously that's a fundamental part of the council's community and corporate plan, with particular focus on a few of those objectives within the plan to address poverty. Probably just for the committee's wider awareness, there will be a progress report presented to Cabinet in December, providing a 6-month update on progress and performance against the whole community and corporate plan, of which activity around poverty will be included. much of that relates to the same mitigating action that they've covered within risk 12, but that would also provide a wider performance-based update of how that's going. And that's probably a good point to remind the committee that lots of the activity we are undertaking to mitigate risks in the risk register will fit within other strategic documents or policy priorities of the council that is progressing. And then finally on that point, Chair, we've asked that that Community Corporate Plan progress report be put on the full plan for this committee, so you have an opportunity to scrutinise the council's performance so far this year in delivering its objectives. And again, there will be strong links to then how that is supporting the management and mitigation of some of the risks.
Thank you, Richard. Yes, we're very keen on that last point you make, because the report that we most recently saw related to the previous year. So getting an update on how we're progressing this year is very important. Could I possibly ask that you do what Jane Rogers did against questions arising from last week's meeting, and send a written reply to members of the committee in regard to any further information around poverty intervention? That would be very helpful. I have three questions relating to the report. In the risk number 8, the pre-mitigation level is at the highest level alongside two other areas of risk, which is 16. And the post-mitigation reduces it to 12. And when I look at the mitigation actions, key changes, the risk has been updated, reflecting the ongoing pressure across social care and health system. I think from everything we know, that's only increasing, together with workforce shortages in some areas. Again, which we've heard some from Jane Rogers and colleagues, has been a significant problem that doesn't appear to be being eased. And progress with mitigating actions has been updated, including recruitment campaigns, care at home, and micro carers project, which we heard a little bit about last week, which sounds very encouraging indeed. But it didn't add up to mitigation that would reduce from 16 to any other number, let alone 12. So just a question on that, and that might be something we can get back to with Jane. The second one is relating to largely to risk 2, which is the sustainability of services, which again has been mitigated from 16 to 12, and I'm really highlighting the highest levels of risk in your report. And on page 9, the budget proposals for 24-25 currently showing a forecast shortfall of £14.4 million. So £14.4 million current forecast shortfall as of this report for next year. So again, I'm puzzled how we would mitigate downwards from 16 to 12 when we're at the same time at another point in the report indicating a budget shortfall of £14.4 million, which would be a very serious concern. And the third one is, might seem somewhat esoteric, but it's in relation to the risk of cyber attack. And from the perspective of somebody who has come into the council, and perhaps colleagues share the training experience which is included, how to manage passwords and so on. However, the efforts of bad actors and criminals just are unflinching. And I'm aware that the number of ransom attacks across the United Kingdom every day is approaching 2 million every single day, ransomware attacks, which is about 20 per second. And the reason why that's relevant and why my question is coming on this is that I think all our councillors and all staff emails are connected to the main server, which will also store a great deal of personal information, if not, I would assume, residence information. And the weakest links will remain phishing links from emails that are opened up. And I didn't I wasn't part of any training that indicated the necessity to ensure that we had passwords that were at least 15 characters long, because the blocks of characters seem to function in blocks of 7 for the reduction of risk, and the bad actors out there would have to go through 3 sets of those blocks, which they generally appear not to wish to do. So also the use of 3 random words rather than any other way of using passwords. And I just want to ask the question, have we given enough level of training to all our staff on a regular basis and to councillors to reduce the level of risk around cyber attacks? Because if they happen, they could be extremely serious, and we certainly wouldn't want that to happen. So those 3 areas, and they may, Richard, well fall outside your domain, I dare say. I don't know if on the first one, we still have Peter Davis with us in the chamber relating to the 14.4 million. Peter, if you could possibly address that. And on the issue of adults, it may be that Jane could perhaps address that one in terms of care. And the third one on cyber attacks, perhaps you could come back on that in a written response, Richard, if we could deal with it that way. But Peter, for thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So if I've taken to your query and your point correctly, I think you're inquiring as to why the level of heightened risk pre-mitigation is 16, and why that is falling in effect to 12 post-mitigation, and in light of the reported £14.4 million budget shortfall. Okay. So I think if I refer back to earlier comments on the previous agenda item, the report that we brought through Cabinet in the last cycle, that provides an outline of the budget framework that we're looking to employ and adopt for next year, the budget principles that sit within that, and my comment of earlier in terms of stabilising the council's finances, putting it on a sustainable path, and obviously without recourse to reserve. That report outlines the stepped process that we work our way through, and in terms of ensuring that our budget estimates are as robust as they are able to be, and that our actions to obviously arrest that shortfall, that we have a clear plan in place and a process. So that is work that is in train. That is a report that has been publicly made available, so that there is clarity and transparency to the process. And it's for that reason, with the comfort and assurance that that process and the robustness of the process that brings, that we see a post-mitigation risk rating of still high, because the issues are still with us, and the risks are ever present, not just for next year, and I think you and the committee know that, but obviously going into the medium term as well. So it is for that reason. And I think if I just ever so briefly just mention, and obviously something for the committee, when the revised date's established to receive scrutiny of the draft financial strategy, that sort of works shoulder to shoulder with the budget process, and therefore and then looks beyond 24, 25 and over the medium term, and again provides us levels of comfort and assurance. So it is through all of those post-mitigation measures that I've talked to that we see that reflected in the report. Whilst I've got the floor, if I just pick off the cyber risk, sits in my portfolio as well. So I think it's just a highlight. There's obviously stuff that I can't talk to publicly, and in terms of the discrete nature of the arrangements that we have in place. What I would say is that we have provided into Governance and Audit Committee in closed session updates on our cybersecurity arrangements to give that committee the comfort and assurances of the arrangements that we have in place. And we have strengthened to I think the very pertinent points that you've highlighted, Chair. We have strengthened those capabilities over recent years in a number of places to an already a heightened and robust level of capability. The point on where the weakest points are, those entry points, is absolutely correct. I will come back to you and the committee in writing just to sort of reaffirm that we have run and we do run cyber weeks. There is an overlay in terms of cyber training that is provided to the extent, and my understanding is that has actually been afforded and offered to members, councillors, as much as it has staff. But I will pick that up. And if there is a need for any update or refresher training for any that might have missed it, I'm sure the team will be entirely comfortable with doing so, because it's entirely appropriate that risk is mitigated and minimised to the greatest extent.
Thank you, Peter. It's not to be unduly anxious about this, but I think just recognising what you're saying. It's not a problem until it happens, at which point it's the biggest problem in the world, and it's that nature of what cyber attacks do. I think I read yesterday the British Library is under attack right now, and it's been pretty well shut down under a ransom attack. That's happened in lots and lots of organisations, and they tend not to publicise it for all sorts of good reasons. I did wonder whether what I believe is available on Outlook, a phishing button, so the potential just to highlight that if any member of staff or councillor are concerned about any particular email, that they put it into the phishing area, that could be separately looked at by a colleague to just be assured. Otherwise, it's a sort of black and white when we might need that shade of grey. But thank you for the response.
Chair, I'll just make 2 points. Firstly, we do receive attacks on a regular basis, and our capability is such that those attacks are averted. Obviously, there's different the extent to which we get those. Obviously, the capabilities that I talk to react and respond in different ways. You will naturally expect there is an awful lot going on in the background, and even before sometimes emails actually arrive in somebody's inbox. But I think the point is acknowledged and well made.
Thanks, Peter. So just addressing, and I think Jane Rogers, you're still with us. If it's possible, Jane, to address the issue of adults, and it's not to try and make a sort of moot point about the numbers, Jane, moving from 16 to 12, but it's the rationale for that being post-mitigated or mitigated down from 16 to 12, when actually the actions appear to be pointing in the opposite direction. If you could possibly address that.
Thanks, Chair. I'll do my best. And I think it is a good challenge. What I would moving from an almost certain risk to a likely risk, I think our rationale for that was around the fact that care provision has become more available over the recent time. So we've talked about that ability to reduce the number of care hours down from what was a very high number to something that is still high but is significantly less. I think that was one of our reasons, and the fact that our triage and prioritisation processes are well embedded. So individual cases are looked at and decisions are made. So it's not a waiting list, as in you go to the bottom and you work your way up through the top. They are regularly prioritised and reprioritised as individual cases need more urgent attention. And I think added to that is that as time has gone on, I think those levels of assurance from a partnership point of view, as we're looking at individual cases and prioritising, have got somewhat more sophisticated, and there's more of a sense of balancing the pressures that come from discharge out of hospital and those pressures that are in risks that may be in the community. So there's more open dialogue, I think, at that sort of partnership level, recognising that risk sort of happens in different parts of that whole system. And what I would say, I think that's our rationale for that. You know, how likely is this going to happen? Is this going to happen? But the impact of it happens still, if it does happen, still remaining major. And I think that's some of the thinking behind where we saw that slight that slight reduction in the level of risk.
That's reassuring, Jane, and I certainly am seeking to move the number back to 16 for no good basis. It's really just that the number mitigating it down appears to be in contrast to the actions that are shown to be taken, and that this is the largest single expenditure area and overspend area in the council. It may be that needs to just have a bit of a look at to make sure that we're not indicating something that will at a future stage be concerned about. But you know, clearly you're the best placed person to make decisions around that. I'm going to just remind members of the recommendations, which were to scrutinise on an ongoing basis the risk assessment and responsibility holders to ensure that strategic risks have appropriately been identified and that risk is being appropriately managed, and that we also, and I just remind you of this, use the risk assessment to inform the future work programme, and therefore if there are future risks that you believe we should be in, and this is a strategic risk register, it's not trying to put in everything we can possibly think of, then please get in touch with me, get in touch with Hazel, get in touch with the chief officers relating to this, if we believe that should be in the future work programme of the committee and other chairs of other committees, because it's quite a cross-cutting issue where issues are of relevance to their work. So please do consider that. And I believe we have considered those points, so I move the report, and we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the item 6, the LDP annual monitoring report. And I see at least one of the officers has joined us, Mark Hand, and I think we're going to move on to you, Mark, if you could introduce yourself, and we'll pick up the, if you could introduce any and summarise any points you want to make, working on the basis that we have already read the report. And thank you to Richard and Hannah as you leave the room as well. Thank you. So over to you, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Chairs.
Sorry, Mark, I'm so sorry. I see Councillor Griffiths is also in the meeting. I didn't know whether Councillor Griffiths wanted to make any introductory remarks as the Cabinet member. Sorry, Mark, for interrupting you just as you got started.
That's okay, Chair. I was just going to say colleagues are waiting the call to come into the room, so I'll let them know to come and join you as well.
Thank you, Mark. That's great. Perhaps while we're doing that, Councillor Griffiths, if you had any comments, any introductory comments before we move on to Mark to pick out some of the key points.
Chair, I'm attending the meeting just in case there are any questions of a policy nature that I could contribute to answering. I think it would be best if you see it that way, if the introduction is provided by officers, and I will be present for any questions.
Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. I just didn't want to miss the opportunity to ask if you had any particular comments. Thank you. We'll move on to Mark, and I think we'll start, Mark. We may well have colleagues joining us as you move on with the overview. But could you just pick out key points, Mark, on the basis that we've already read the report and colleagues are just joining us as we speak? Please do come forward. That's Rachel, Craig, and Daniel. So,
do you mind if we pause, Chair? Colleagues, we're going to do that intro.
Yeah, great.
So if you just hold on a second, if that's okay.
Great.
Craig and Rachel will
I
cover
seem
that.
to be asking everyone to do the intro, and we're now passing that one along. Very fair too. So, as you settle in, who would wish to provide an introduction? Is it Craig? Just to pick out the key points, if we could, Craig, and could you, each of you, if you are speaking, just introduce yourself from the for the benefit of anybody who may be watching online now or at future point. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just for everyone online, I'm Craig O'Connor, Head of Planning for Monmouthshire County Council. Today I'm just going to run through briefly with you a bit of an overview and summarise the report that's in front of the Scrutiny Committee today, which is the annual monitoring report for the period the 1st of April 2022 to the 31st of March 2023. This report reviews the planning policy framework within the local development plan. So this is within the existing LDP, just looking at the planning policies to review how they're functioning, how they're doing against 87 of key indicators which are measured by Welsh Government. So this report, after being scrutinised today, will be forwarded to the Cabinet Member, Paul Griffiths, to pass on to the Welsh Government, which they will then look at this. And this is the 9th annual monitoring report that we've done over the plan period. And as members know, the existing LDP is at the end of its lifeline. So it ended in 2021. But we are still reviewing the policies just so that we are aware of their functionality. So as outlined within the report, a number of the indicators are green, so 61 of the 87 indicators are green, 23 are amber, and 3 are red. So it does show that the plan is functioning very well, ultimately, against those indicators. I will home in on those red ratings in a moment, so you can get into a bit of that detail, ultimately. And there are colleagues here as well to help with some of that indicators. So with regards to the green indicators, over this planning period, we've approved 343 dwellings, 343 completions, so they're houses that have been completed over that plan period. And through the plan period, all 7 of the LDP allocated sites have now got planning permission or are working towards planning permission. 4 are currently under construction, and that's at Fairfield Maybe in Chepstow, the Crick Road site in Portskewitt, Rockfield Road in Undy, and the Vinegar Hill site in Undy as well, are all under construction at the moment, all delivering on those housing objectives. 2 sites are complete, so Sudbrook Paper Mill and Dairy Farm in Abergavenny. There's 2 strategic sites in the LDP which are fully complete, and 1 is partially complete. That is the Wanlstow site in Monmouth, and there's still a second phase to come there of 110 dwellings. But all 7 sites have the benefit of planning consent and have come forward. So during this monitoring period, we approved 2 sites which resulted in affordable housing on site. That was 1 change of use development in Chepstow for 8 homes, and the Vinegar Hill Undy site, we approved 39 affordable homes, which was 25%, ensuring full policy compliance there. We've still got a total of 40 hectares of employment land available, ensuring that we are available for businesses to come into the area. And we also approved 9 tourist accommodation schemes. We had no applications on floodplains, so nothing was contrary to Technical Advice Note 15, which is the national planning policy for flooding, so we didn't approve anything on floodplains, which is, again, a really positive indicator. Turning to some of the red indicators within the report, the main red one is that there is currently a shortfall in our housing delivery. This is about 1,500 homes against the target of 4,500 over the plan period, 2021. There are a number of reasons for this. mainly the shortfall is a result of the strategic sites taking a bit of time to come online and to come to be undeveloped. The other is a significant environmental constraint of phosphates within the north of our county that has held up delivery ultimately, and resulting in us not being able to progress with some of those sites as quickly as we would have liked. But as members are aware, there are solutions now in place as we move forward with that. It is worth noting that we have approximately 1,000 homes which have planning permission in the system at the moment and are due to be complete in the near future. The other red rating over this plan period was in relation to the delivery of affordable housing. 48 houses were completed within the monitoring period, and it does still show a shortfall of 658 against the target of 950 over the plan period. This shortfall is largely in relation to the leading for the strategic policies and also the impact of phosphates again. They have held up a number of schemes. I know that some of the rural social landlords are looking to push forward, and we're working with them to find solutions ultimately to this environmental constraint that is particularly having an impact in the north of the county. In terms of the last red ratings, that relates to the retail aspects and the vacancy rates in our central shopping areas of Monmouth in particular, and they have risen in the last 4 consecutive years. So the vacancy rate stands now at 18.2% in Monmouth, and that's an increase from 15.5% in 2021. So we are certainly looking at those vacancy rates. This has reflected in relation to some loss of some particularly big national stores such as Peacocks and M&Co. But we are certainly looking at ways that we can ensure that we have a more robust planning policy framework within the replacement local development plan in terms of looking at alternative uses in our town centres and looking at those primary shop fronts to ensure that they are in the right place. And my colleague Dan Fordham is here today from the regeneration team just to put a bit of an emphasis on that as well, just in terms of the work that we are doing to move forward to address this issue, which has been flagged as a red rating in our current plan. So they're the main key indicators, I think, Chair, just for members. I know there's a lot of measures within the report. I don't want to hold up too much in terms of us getting into a discussion and to look at and here to answer any questions and queries that members have, really. Ultimately, this it is a factual report. It will be submitted to the Welsh Government, but I think it's really clear to show the sort of challenges we have in Monmouthshire. And in my view, it gives us more emphasis to ensure that we progress with the replacement local development plan so we can get additional land secured to deliver particularly the affordable housing that we much want to see in Monmouthshire.
Thank you, Craig, and very helpful introduction. If I may, whilst I'm looking for any other hands to go up, just ask a couple of questions. On page 3 and 4, and you related to the issue of delivery of homes and the shortfall against that, I wanted to just refer to the level of affordable homes as part of the entirety of homes that were delivered, which I think were a running rate of 22% of the total achieved. In the report, the 1,000 homes which have received planning permission, there are 280 which have apparently achieved planning permission for affordable homes. That's planning permission, that's not obviously delivery. So 22% is our experience, and the question is that our plan moving forward is to move that to 50%, which is clearly an enormous jump indeed. It's it's about 150% increase. So really a question about, I've previously indicated concern, I know other colleagues have done so, about the achievability of that plan, and just relating it to this, I'd be grateful for your comments on that. And related partly to this, 3.14, there is a reference that the Council is being proactive in proactive discussions regarding phosphates. I'm not sure in what sense we could argue that we're being proactive, but perhaps you could clarify. I think there are many people who would say that's not the case, but maybe you could clarify that. But the related question to that is, in the report which clarifies that improvement commitments are to take place from March 2025, would those improvements not clash directly with the intention to progress the significant housing deliveries that are in the forward plan of the RLDP as it's currently drafted, or would they assist that delivery? And do we know what the significant improvements will be, what level of improvement they will be in terms of phosphates, emissions from treatment works? So questions related to those two areas, be grateful for a response. I don't know if you want to start on that, Craig, and it may be that Councillor Griffiths wants to pick up on the affordable homes delivery issue as well, but I'll leave that to yourselves. Craig.
Thank you, Chair. With regards to the affordable housing, those are 1,000 planning permissions in the system. They don't all relate to affordable housing sites. So our affordable housing policy, there's a set criteria where on-site delivery is delivered. For any additional gain, we have affordable housing contribution. So not all of those 1,000 will hit that planning policy provision for on-site affordable housing. If there's a net increase of a dwelling on-site, then a financial contribution is sought on each of those dwellings, and that is then pooled together for housing officers to work with housing associations to deliver affordable housing sites. As much as in the last month I shared with the Performance Scrutiny Committee some of the affordable housing schemes that we've done in Monmouthshire, that's where that money is pooled. So not all of those 1,000 dwellings council would actually hit that provision. Within our more, in terms of policy compliance, for instance, the site in Raglan recently got planning consent by the planning committee that delivered 35% affordable housing on site, but not all of those 1,000 would deliver that. So it is a case-by-case scenario, and those sites, obviously, a significant amount of the LTP sites have already been delivered now, as I've already outlined. So we don't have many more to bring forward in terms of that mass affordable housing. So we are working with housing associations to see where they can deliver those opportunities. But with regards to the 50-50%, which we're working towards on the replacement local development plan, as I've outlined in previous meetings, we are certainly working with our viability assessor and assessing every single application to ensure, for the replacement local development plan, to ensure that they are viable and they do deliver the 50-50 affordable housing provision and net zero carbon. They have to evidence that to be allocated within the replacement local development plan. So that is being independently scrutinised, those viability assessments, and they won't be allocated unless they deliver the 50-50 affordable housing sites. And then it will be down for the planning committee over the years to ensure that we refuse any applications that seek to undermine that policy provision which Monmouthshire puts in place. So we are very, very strict ensuring that that is the way that we will move forward with regards to housing delivery in Monmouthshire. We do have a significant amount of people on the waiting list, and that is a key planning policy within being developed as part of the replacement local development plan. So we are certainly very confident that that will be the position as we move forward, and I think Councillor Griffiths would certainly like to comment on that as we move forward.
So just if I may, sorry for interrupting, Craig, but just to get as clear as we can on this. So our experience in the LDP report in front of us is 22% affordable housing.
No, sorry, Councillor, we've got two different policy frameworks. So there's in the south of the county and Sevenside region is 25% policy on strategic sites. In the north of the county, it's 35% in Monmouth and Abergavenny.
I was just looking at page 3 and 4, which indicated affordable homes, which were at 50% of the LDP target, and of the total 658 against the 3,000 or so that were delivered, that comes to about 22% affordable.
So Rachel, it's 680, isn't it? We've delivered against 950 over the plan period. So the plan period the LDP had to deliver 950 homes from allocated sites. We've delivered 680. So there's a shortfall, councillor, of what the difference is that is.
Oh, okay. I'm trying to make sense of those numbers that are in the report. They don't seem to tie up with that. But I guess the broader question is, I think you've clarified that if we are not able to achieve 50% affordable homes moving forward in the RLDP, then there will be no progression of that housing development.
Yes, that be the policy position of Monmouthshire County Council. The only way that site goes forward if it delivers the 50% affordable housing.
That's it. So if developers came forward with something less than that, 48%, 40%, anything less than that, we would not see any new housing being built.
That is, it's not policy compliant. So okay. I would suggest that my recommendation would be based on that local planning policy framework that we should refuse the planning application.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And Councillor Griffiths, I think your hand was raised, and Craig, I hope that's not interrupting your flow, but it might be that this is an area that Councillor Griffiths wanted to come specifically to before we perhaps come back to the phosphate issue. Is that possible? Does that work for you, Craig? Yeah. Yep. So Councillor Griffiths.
Thanks, Chair. And I think the discussion has, I hope, added useful clarity to the intended difference between the replacement plan and the existing plan. My own calculations are not dissimilar to yours. In the existing plan, we've had targets for affordable housing, and as the applications come in, as the case is made for the viability of the affordable homes, then delivery has on occasion been less than the targets. The difference that we intend in the replacement local development plan is that the affordable homes are not to be a negotiable byproduct, if you like, of the development. They are to be the core target of the development. The current situation, as I understand it, is that if you allocate land, let's say for 300 housing, a developer can come, make the application for 300 homes, and should they go to appeal, the assessor will test the viability of the affordable housing, and it may be less than the target. With our intended replacement local development plan, we will allocate 300 homes, of which 150 must be affordable. The application will only be compliant if it provides those 150 homes, and that is the criteria which an inspector would be required to maintain on appeal. And as you say, it does mean, and I think we should all be alert to these consequences, if developers decide that in those terms it is not profitable to build the 300 homes, they won't get built. I could personally, it'd be my policy to live with that consequence, in that what this county needs is the affordable homes and not an ever-increasing supply of market homes for people who may not be local to the county and to our economy.
Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. I wonder if I could just, while we're on this particular point, just ask the related question. Have we considered what our neighbours across the border in England, Herefordshire and Gloucestershire, what they have in their forward development plans, local development plans, in relation to the kind of percentages of affordable homes that they're inviting builders to, given the proximity that we would have to them, and whether developers would choose to build in England or to build in Monmouthshire. I don't know if we've considered that. Could you respond to that, either Craig or Councillor Griffiths?
I'm happy to take that, Councillor Griffiths.
I'd be interested in your answer as well, Craig.
Yeah.
My own. That's
that's fine. I'll take it. I mean, me and Councillor Griffiths met with Forester Dean actually this week to talk about their replacement local development plan, and we certainly commenting and watching their development of their growth proposals, looking at how that impacts on the transport network and infrastructure. So those conversations are certainly ongoing, and we will certainly keep that collaboration going. We do have to work up a statement of common ground with our neighbouring authorities as part of the evidence base for the replacement local development plan. So this is an ongoing piece of work, Councillor, which we'll certainly keep moving forward with and keep those conversations happening to ensure that development proposals are looked at cumulatively in terms of their impact on the wider network, particularly with regards to infrastructure and highways.
Thank you, Craig. It might be very helpful to avoid further questions on this to include any information that we have from Forester Dean, Gloucestershire, Herefordshire in the as a reference point within the RLDP moving forward. But coming back to the report in front of us, that second question about phosphates, which really was about whether or not the what appears to be a commitment for improvement. That's a quotation from the report from March 2025. Will that improvement in phosphate emissions from treatment plants, will that have any effect at all, neutral or beneficial or detrimental to the delivery of new homes?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I don't want to go back on the affordable housing question too much, but I just wanted to clarify in terms of this annual monitoring report. The report outlines two sites which did deliver the affordable housing. One was 100% affordable housing scheme, and the other was the housing scheme in Vinegar Hill in terms of being that policy compliance. So just so members are aware, over this monitoring period, those two sites did deliver the on-site delivery with full policy compliance. So just to make members aware that there might be some historic sites which have resulted in reduced amount of affordable housing delivery for their own individual site situations. But over this period that we're looking at, which is the report before members today, the two sites did receive 100% compliance, just for that bit of clarity. Appreciate this report just looks at 1 year rather than the full 10 years of the plan. But to come on to phosphates, in terms of the improvements that are proposed, so I've been working with Welsh Water, Natural Resources Wales, Welsh Government, and sitting on a working group at a very high level, sort of technical officer level, looking at solutions for phosphates across Wales. And Welsh Water are delivering £100 million worth of solutions across the country. And in Monmouthshire, we are going to benefit from that in the treatment works of Monmouth and Lamfoes, which serves Abergavenny. So that will have phosphate stripping capability installed by 31st of March 2025. At the moment, both those wastewater treatments don't have any phosphate stripping capability at all. So the usual way that phosphates is dealt with is by ion dosing, which results in phosphates being able to become a solid compound and then being able to take that out of the river and out of the water. So that's how it is generally treated. They're looking at an alternative solution in Monmouth because the River Wye is particularly high in iron as well. So they're doing a bit of research and development in terms of how they can take the phosphates out, but they have assured us that there is certainly positive work going in that direction and ensured that phosphate stripping capability will be installed by the 31st of March 2025. What that means is that we will then be able to ensure that we can allow development and it wouldn't have an adverse impact on water quality within the River Wye and the River Usk. So that will enable us to move forward with our objective of achieving affordable housing-led sites within those key primary settlements. And that has been done in collaboration with Natural Resources Wales and Dro Cymru Welsh Water, as I've said. So it is a significant impact. It will result in us being able to address those issues in those areas. As well as that, we are also sitting on politically and as officers, Councillor Catherine may be sitting on the Usk Catchment Partnership, looking at the nutrient management plan and how we ensure that we manage nutrients in our rivers in the Usk, and also on the Wye Nutrient Management Board as well. And I also sit on that board, working with neighbouring authorities to ensure that we manage nutrients, not just phosphates, but other nutrients as well, and manage them in the long term. So So they are two key boards that we are sitting on as a council, looking at ways to ensure that we don't have any further adverse impacts on water quality in those two sensitive rivers.
Thank you, Craig, and a very helpful response. Moving on to questions from Councillor Strong.
Thank you, Chair. Page 197 of the report, my old favourite, the link road from the B4245 down to Seven Tunnel Junction in one direction and up to the M48 in the other direction. Although I note in the paragraph it refers to the A48, whether that's a typo or just in anticipation that if our plans are successful, the M48 would become the A48. I'm not sure which it is there, but regardless of that, councillors will be aware, I think everybody will be aware of the huge pressure on the 4245. Craig in his report mentioned two sites that would increase that pressure, Crick and Vinegar Hill. So the urgency of our plans coming to fruition is clear. I'd like to ask then what progress is being made in the discussions that are mentioned. First of all then, in relation to the link down to Seven Tunnel Junction, which does have Welsh Government approval, and secondly, in relation to the link up to the M48, which is really just a very short extension of the same road, which did not, or has not at this stage, got Welsh Government approval, even though, in my mind, it will not increase the amount of traffic. It will just ensure that that traffic doesn't get clogged up so much, particularly in Mega, but also to some extent even at High Beach in Chepstow. So any indication of progress would be much welcomed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Strong. And Craig, did you want to pick that up?
I'm wondering if Mark Hand, the head of highways police making, is online, whether he'd have the latest in terms of information. Mark, did you have the latest with regards to that?
Yeah, thanks, Craig. Thanks, Chair, if that's okay with you. And Councillor Griffiths may wish to add to it, depending on what I say. In terms of the B425 link down to the Seven Tunnel Junction station, that's still being progressed by Transport for Wales colleagues as part of a wider package, and we're in discussions with them about active travel improvements and how that's all linked up. So I think generally speaking, that's something we support, but I think the council's position is we want the M48 link as well, and that's an ongoing discussion, not a point of agreement at the moment with TFW and the Burns Commission to explain why we think it's essential in terms of redistributing properly traffic on the road hierarchy, because we know that the data shows at some times of the year the B4245 has more traffic per day than the M48, which doesn't make any sense at all. So the Welsh Government / TFW concerns will be that the road link will encourage more people into cars, which would be an unintended consequence. So we're trying to put forward the case to explain why we think it is needed. And with the rail improvements that are proposed at Seven Tunnel Junction and the other train stations that are out to consultation at the moment, that needn't be the case. So there isn't sort of a noticeable progress to report on that front, Councillor Strong, but there's ongoing discussions, and that's the council's position. I didn't know if Councillor Griffiths wanted to add to that or clarify any of that further.
Councillor Griffiths, did you want to add anything?
Just very briefly to confirm the information that Mark Hand has given, Transport for Wales has offered its support to the link to the B425. Monmouthshire County Council has responded positively to that link, but robustly in saying that it is insufficient and that our support is for the link to be made to what is now the M48. Welsh Government has not responded to that point that we've made. We're looking forward to the review of Chepstow's transport circumstances, which we believe will take place or will be initiated in the next few weeks. I think we would take the opportunity of that review to show that access to the M48 is a factor which should be considered with reference to the Chepstow review itself. So that will be another opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. I'm going to move on to Councillor Howells.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, officers. I'm just curious as to, as this is a 10-year plan from 2011 to 2021, why there isn't a line drawn under it as a final report, and how long will that continue, so that we can, presumably the figures are working in conjunction with the new replacement local development plan. And also on 3.8, the shop vacancy rate in Monmouth so high. I heard you refer to it earlier, Craig, so I'd be interested to know what is being done to combat this. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Howells. I know that's something we'd all be interested in, but Craig.
Thank you, Councillor Howells, for the questions. In terms of the 10-year plan, yeah, we could certainly draw a line under it and stop monitoring it in terms of what housing we are delivering and looking at the planning policy framework. But I think it's a positive thing that we keep reviewing how we're doing as a planning service and how our planning policies are functioning and the level of affordable housing we're delivering. Is it policy compliant? I think that's good information for you as members. It's good information as officers as we move forward with the replacement plan. I think it's certainly good to know how we are doing. And whilst government is certainly asking for this report as well, so we have had the conversation with Welsh Government officers as to whether it's needed anymore, because the plan effectively ended in 2021. But this is the current planning policy framework that we are working within. We are certainly, as all members know, working very hard at the moment on the replacement local development plan and looking at the planning policy framework. But this information really helps guide us, I think, in terms of how we should be looking at planning policies going forward. There's a number of other objectives now that we need to address, such as net zero carbon, sustainability, renewable energy. So there's more policies coming forward in the replacement plan, which will have its own monitoring framework. But I think for us not to stop monitoring, although it does take up work for us, all this information is relevant, is needed, and it's helpful for us in terms of the development of the replacement plan. And whilst government is certainly looking for this information in terms of how we are delivering it as a council, in terms of particularly around affordable housing and housing delivery and employment. So I think it is all worthwhile information. Sorry, Councillor Howells, I'm going to ask the second part of your question. What was
about Monmouth and the vacancy rates? What we're doing about it? It's 18.2%.
So this is a very interesting area, and I'll pass to my colleague Dan in a moment, who can go into a bit more detail into the regeneration projects and what we're looking to do. We had a meeting yesterday, myself, Dan and Rachel, about the replacement plan, what policies we can do to try and ensure that we retain retail and look at alternative uses in our town centres moving forward. We all know that retail habits have changed since the pandemic. We're all shopping differently, we're all acting differently, but how can we ensure that our town centres are vibrant and we don't have the level of vacancy rates that we see being recorded over this monitoring period? So maybe, Dan, I can pass to yourself now just to build on some of that in terms of the work that is being done. But I can assure you, Councillor Howells, that we are looking at ways to address the change in how we're all acting and how we are all moving in our town centres. So we are looking to do that in the replacement plan. So Dan,
while you're looking at that, could you also include, does this include banks? Presumably it does, in terms of voids in the High Street, and if that's any relevant point in regard to Monmouth.
Yeah, happy to pick that up. Daniel Fordham, Regeneration Manager. So the first thing I think to say on the issue of the vacancies in Monmouth is that the headline figures that we've got in the report here conceal what is probably actually a slightly more positive picture. And members who are familiar with Monmouth will be probably seeing that on the ground already. So the headline rate in the report is 18.2%, so that's way above the national average, and that's not a new concern. It's a recurrent theme in conversations in Monmouth with businesses, with stakeholders and so on. And for that reason, we commissioned some analysis earlier in the year, starting in February, to really kind of get under the skin of this issue of vacancies in Monmouth and also in Chepstow, which was another area of concern. to understand in a bit more detail what is vacant beyond what's kind of apparently visibly vacant on the high street, to get some insight into what the issues are driving that vacancy and to understand how we and partners can best intervene to tackle the issue, to support those vacancies being brought back into use. And our initial analysis, our initial count back in March was very similar to the headline figure that we've got here, 18.4%. The numbers are not directly comparable because we weren't looking at precisely the same area, but we were getting effectively the same picture. But the more detailed analysis that we've done over the last 6 months or so, and that's included conversations with building owners, with letting agents in Monmouth to understand the kind of detail of the picture. By September, so the same time as this count was being done, so that 18.4% that we found, that's 35 units. Of those, by September, 7 of the units were let, so that's 4% reduction already. They may not, at that point, have been visibly occupied, but they were let. Some of them, they were on their way to being occupied, and some of them by now will be occupied. And you'll have seen recent openings. There was a bakery, there's the new Majestic wine shop in the former M&Co. There's an electrical store that's opened in what had formerly been a charity shop, but had been vacant for some time. White Swan Court at the northern end of town, there were 3 vacants, one of which is now occupied, 2 more are let, and that will then be fully occupied. So we're seeing some visible changes in Monmouth. And then in addition to those, there were another 4, so it's another 2% that were, at the point when we last looked in September, were being refitted or were under offer. So again, they're moving towards occupation. So the residual figure, the vacancy rate that when you kind of scratch the surface that we got from that analysis in September, was down to about 12%. So that's then below the national average. And I suspect figures aren't available in the report for vacancies for last year, but I suspect even with that headline figure of just over 18%, if we were comparing them to figures from last year, we would probably be seeing a fall already. So the picture is a bit more positive than perhaps it looks from this, but that's not to say that we're complacent. As Craig says, there's some work that's being done on how the planning policy framework addresses this. But then in kind of practical terms on the ground, some of you will be aware of the building grants programme that we're introducing to help refurbish empty units, bring them back into use. We're currently talking to the owners of 2 significant empty buildings in the town centre, including one of the former banks, with a view to grant to bring those back into use, and we'll be shortly launching an expressions of interest process to make those grants available more widely. We've been developing in my team a meanwhile use scheme, so for a temporary use of empty shops, probably in the northern end of town where those vacancies are now predominantly concentrated, which will bring a programme of pop-ups of temporary uses of those empty shops and seeking funding for that for next year. We've been working with Monmouth Town Council on a programme to improve the appearance of some of the empty shops. And then in addition to that, there are the public realm proposals, which we brought forward earlier in the year for improvements in Mono Street, public realm, streetscape, active travel improvements. And there's really good evidence and a growing body of evidence, which is referred to in the report, that shows that those kind of interventions, those kind of improvements in town centres don't just bring benefits in terms of health and safety and well-being, but there's good evidence that they bring economic benefits in terms of increased footfall, reduced vacancies and so on. So there's a number of pieces of work there.
Thank you, Dan. That's very helpful. It's also encouraging, so appreciate that. I think my screen's just moved down, but I think it was Councillor Fuchs, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Councillor Neil. I did indeed. Thank you for this report. It's really interesting and very lengthy. Lots to take in there. I had a question actually relating to what you were saying, Dan. I was going to ask a similar question to Councillor Howells. So on 3.18, you talk about the report that's being done on this vacancy rate. Can we see that report, please? I think that would be really helpful. And it's my ward you're talking about there in the High Street in Monmouth, so I'd really like to be able to see that report. I had a question around housing, and that is, given my earlier comment in this meeting about the lack of single adult male accommodation in Monmouth for homeless people, there's a site called Wheatfield Close that was, I think, vacated during the pandemic, and I wanted to know what's happening with that, because I did hear anecdotally that that is owned by Monmouthshire Housing Association. No progress made because of the phosphates issue. But if we're saying the phosphates issue is now resolved, when can we get cracking with that building? Because as I understand it, they have the funding available and are ready to go with that. Another question on page 187 or 197, depending on which bit of the report you're looking at. Again, in my ward, Monmouth Coach Station, it says no further work. We really would love to have a National Express stopping in Monmouth. I think it's so important. We don't have a train station. Our bus station is a lay-by, basically. It's just a tiny lay-by, and we're very poorly served, I'm afraid, by coaches, which can take people to London or wherever, Birmingham, etc. So why is there no further work on that? And I just wanted to say I'm really pleased to read, and I knew Councillor Strong would mention it, about the B4245 and M48 Link Road, and that those discussions are ongoing because talking to people in Roggett, Megarundi, and of course Chepstow High Beach Roundabout, that could make a significant difference to traffic in the county.
Thank you, Councillor Fuchs. I think the last point is a comment more than a question, and indeed the National Express one too. I think they're well-made comments, and I'm sure the links for Monmouth are something that we very much want to welcome to be improved. Could I ask you to possibly address the first of those, which were questions about seeing the report on the vacancy rates and the lack of accommodation relating to the particular building that Councillor Fuchs was relating to that might now be possible if the phosphate issue will be reduced from March 31st at the very latest.
So just very briefly on the report, yes, happy to share that with members.
Thank you, Councillor Fuchs, for the question about Whitfield. Yes, that was a very interesting case, which I was working with Monmouthshire Housing Association on at the time when phosphates came in. So they were working up a scheme to renovate that site and to rebuild it. But unfortunately, with the impact of phosphates, we weren't able to take that site forward. And we used the site quite innovatively. It's one of the only sites in Wales, actually, that we used a bit of a transfer on. So their drainage requirements, their output from that site was transferred onto another site, which they'd already commenced work on, which is a site in Wisham for 9 affordable housing dwellings. So they've provided 9 affordable housing sites in Monmouth and used that output for that. So we had to evidence as part of the planning application there was neutrality in terms of the impact on water quality within the River Wye. So we managed to get that site over the line, and we're working with Monmouthshire Housing Association in terms of that objective. But now, as I explained earlier, we do have a phosphate solution in Monmouth for the 31st of March 2025. So we will be working with Monmouthshire Housing Association to how they can get Whitfield up and running. And there is a legal agreement to say that they can start development until we have a phosphate solution and they can evidence that there isn't any harm on the water quality. So we'll be working with Monmouthshire Housing Association to bring that site forward now that we do have a solution for phosphates, which is, again, really positive as we move forward.
Great, thank you, Craig. That's very helpful. Councillor Fuchs, I think you've still got your hand up.
Sorry, just so for clarification's purposes, that was a helpful explanation, Craig. So for clarification purposes, what I don't understand really is, what you're saying is they couldn't rebuild Wheatfield even though there were already dwellings there with waste, shall we say, and a certain number of, a certain amount of waste, but instead of just rebuilding there, they decided to rebuild in Wisham, because as I understood it, you can replace like for like, even with the phosphates issue. So I just want to understand that. Sorry, but I think it's important.
Okay, thank you.
No, Councillor, it's a very valid question. Monmouthshire Housing Association, it's very, very close to starting construction on this other site within Monmouth. So they had 2 sites, and there is a bit more of efficiency on the Whitfield site, so they wanted to go for an additional level of housing. So we all were aware of conversations that were being had with Natural Resources Wales and Drio Cymru Welsh Water about a solution coming forward. So in terms of Monmouthshire Housing Association assets, we work with them to deliver the site in Monmouth, in Wylesham, whilst knowing that Whitfield will come online at a later date, and then we can have additional level of housing at Whitfield because it's an efficient use of the land. Instead of doing like for like, we can potentially go higher and have a net increase at Whitfield. So it was more productive to do it this way in a more efficient use of the lands, and also given where funding streams were for affordable housing, it was right that we still secure the level of affordable housing in Monmouth at Wylesham, also knowing that Whitfield will come online at a later date, which is the situation we're in now. So hopefully it'll result in a net increase in affordable housing provision ultimately.
Thank you, Craig. I'm going to move us on now, and just to remind the committee members that the recommendations in front of us were that we scrutinise the 9th Local Development Plan Annual Monitoring Report and the comments accordingly, and that we recommend to the Cabinet Member for Sustainable Economy Deputy Leader, indeed the Interim Leader, endorsing the 9th Local Development Plan Annual Monitoring Report for submission to the Welsh Government. I move the report. And we move on to, thank you, colleagues, I move us on to item 7, which is the schools funding formula. And thank you to officers in front of us. Thanks very much for your answers and your responses. And as you move out, I think we're going to see Nikki moving in. Thanks a lot. You've already joined the meeting, Nikki, from the chamber seats, but thank you for coming up front. So this, as you settle in, Nikki, this is a very particular report in front of us relating to the schools funding formula. And members' recommendation is that we scrutinise the proposals and responses already received and any comments on the proposals that we may have which would be considered by the Cabinet. So, Nikki, working on the assumption that we have read the report, is there anything you wanted to particularly highlight or pick out?
Thank you, Chair. Just very quickly, just to give a very quick background, obviously this is a very exciting time. It's our first 3 to 19 school in Monmouthshire, and therefore the paper before you, obviously we need to fund the school correctly and to bring forward proposals to allow that funding to go out to school. You'll be aware that all schools have a funding formula, which we use as a fair funding formula across all our schools to ensure that 2 identical schools receive the same funding. And therefore, what we are looking to do is amalgamate the primary and the secondary with a few slight changes to bring the funding formula for our 3 to 19 school. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. So I'm looking at questions, and Councillor Fuchs.
Thank you. My first thing I wanted to mention, Chair, is I don't know if I have to declare an interest on this point because I'm a governor at Monmouth Comprehensive School.
I think it wouldn't be prejudicial, but if you'd like to fill in the form to say that it's a non-prejudicial interest, okay. Have you got the form? Yeah, thanks.
I don't know if I've got the form, but I'm sure I can find it. But I did actually have a comment I wanted to make, if I may, Councillor Neil, or I can do it after Councillor Strong, as you wish.
It's okay to make the comment if you've already declared the interest and ready to fill in the form.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
Thank you. So my comment was I wanted to say thank you for listening to, you'll note other members of the committee and chair that later on in the report there's a section where the head teacher and some governors, I think from Monmouth Comprehensive, put forward some concerns about the funding formula. And so I just wanted to say thank you for listening to them, because this solution, thank you to officers, I guess, to listening for them, because there is a solution in place now for 25-26, which the governing body and the senior leadership team are happy with. So thank you.
Yeah, that's one of the notable features, I think, of the report was the feedback from the consultation and comments made and solutions taken. Thank you for that. Councillor Strong.
Thank you, Chair. The report contains a formula in relation to maintenance of the new building based upon the assumption that maintenance costs will be lower because, well, it's a new building and there are warranties in place to cover various things. Can I ask, is that formula, was that sort of put in place and just accepted before the experience of Caldecott and Monmouth schools were taken into account, or have we sort of looked again at the formula against that experience? Again, a bit anecdotally, I mean, I think at Caldecott there were a number of issues of maintenance, possibly even disputes over what was covered by warranty and what wasn't. So are we sure, really, when it comes down to it, that the formula is the best we can do in the light of the recent experience that we've had?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Yeah, a very valid question. Actually, the formula was put in place at around the time that we were building those two schools, and they were going through the construction phase. In terms of, there were some changes made from comments at that point in time. We had reduce the maintenance completely for the schools, but then as they raised a fact that there is routine maintenance, you have to have your PAT testing done every year, whether it's a brand new school or a 10-year-old school. So there were some things put in place for that. In terms of looking back on the maintenance, we haven't done any detailed reviews. We do know that there are, that we do see a reduction in the costs, obviously, for them being brand new schools. But that is something, that's something more that I'm more than happy to do and have a look at and bring forward to the School Budget Forum so that they understand those costs involved. As I said, that formula, that reduction, has been in place for a number of years now and has affected, any new primary or secondary school that's come on stream since then.
Thank you, Councillor Strong. Just one question from me, Nikki, and that is that we received 7 responses, which seemed a very low level of response to something that actually is potentially very important. Do we know, or have we got a reasonable estimate of how many consultees or potential consultees had access to the consultation, if it weren't a case of them being sent out?
Yeah, so the consultation list, so effectively it was all members, it was all schools and all governing bodies. So you can see there was a massive range of audience. I guess you could argue it two ways: either they were happy and they agreed with the proposals put forward, or they weren't engaged with it and felt that it didn't affect them. I will just say, and come back on the earlier question about Monmouth Comprehensive School in terms of the responses from them, and they have changed our thoughts around that, and we will be reviewing the management structure. So I think the message going forward for all of our formula changes, which we look at regularly, is we do need to find a way that we can engage better and make sure that those audiences come forward with their proposals.
Yeah, it may well be that this seemed to be, technical, if not esoteric, and therefore something for other people. But there might be some learning in terms of how we engage. Good, thank you very much. And just to remind members of the committee, recommendations to scrutinise the proposals and responses received, provide comments on the proposals, which will be considered by Cabinet. So we have done so. I move the report. And move us on to just the final couple of issues, which are item number 8, the Forward Work Programme and Action List. Hazel?
Yeah, I just would like to draw members' attention to some changes to the work programme that's been published today. Apologies that these have come up pretty short notice, and we will make sure that we communicate this to you properly via emails, and we'll send out invites early so everybody has them in the diary. But the meeting that was proposed for the 29th, which we've cancelled, there were 3 items on that agenda. That deferred business was the asset management strategy, strategy, the financial strategy and the month 6, as the Chair's explained earlier. So what we're proposing is that we discuss those at a special meeting we would call on the 15th of January next year. They're set within strict timescales to go forward for decision, and unfortunately that is the midpoint that we would be able to contribute to those pieces of work, which I know the committee was keen to do. So if it's okay with you, Chair, I think you're okay for the 15th, but are you happy that we notify members and call the meeting on that day?
Yes, I think it'd be really important. Apart from anything else, colleagues will be aware of where we will be in the budget development process. So actually having a good understanding of the year to date, as far as we can see it at that point, would be very informative. So thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chair. And then on the 30th of January, which was the ordinary meeting, we would have scrutiny of the budget proposals, and then your next meeting would be the 20th of February, where we've put in the exam performance and school attendance details. I wouldn't talk through the rest of the programme, Chair, because it's subject to change, but we'll email you with the dates, and we'll send you the work programme through and all of the diary invites, so that you've got them in your calendar from now on. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Hazel. And item 9, similarly, it's available to colleagues to peruse, the Council and Cabinet Work Plan. Item 10 is the minutes of the 24th of October, and I move the minutes unless there are any corrections. Councillor Fuchs, did you have your hand up? Or is that a legacy hand?
I did have it up, Councillor Neil. I don't know, being a relatively new member of this committee, I don't know when we can bring these things up, but I'm really keen to that Scrutiny gets a chance to look at the Tackling Poverty Action Plan. And I know we're going to be busy with budget stuff and big meeting agendas, and in February we've got the schools information, but could we put it into the March forward plan, please? Into the March meeting, do you think?
Thanks for raising it, and you're absolutely right to raise that at this point. It's very welcome. We will definitely look at when we can put that in, whether it's March but as soon as we possibly can, we will look to do that, Councillor Fuchs. So thanks for raising it.
Chair,
Councillor Strong.
Before you close the meeting, can I just crave your indulgence? Given that we discussed social care quite a bit earlier in the agenda, I think we should note that today is Carers' Rights Day, and perhaps through you we could express the thanks to the meeting, and perhaps even the thanks to the whole council, if you like to usurp your authority there, to give our thanks to the carers in Monmouthshire, the family members, the friends, the neighbours, and especially the young carers who do so much for us, not just saving us what must come into millions of pounds, but also being a godsend to the people that they care for.
Thank you, Councillor Strong. I don't think I could improve in the way that you just expressed that, and I certainly wouldn't speak on behalf of the whole council, or somebody will come back to me on that, I'm sure, but I certainly would hope I could speak on behalf of the whole committee, and I would be extraordinarily surprised if anyone within the council would disavow those thoughts. We massively appreciate the efforts that are made very often 24 hours a day, 7 days a week by carers, many unpaid, right across the county, and your words speak that truth very, very well indeed, so thank you. So yeah, I think I received your support for the minutes of the 24th of October, just to reaffirm that, and that the next meeting, as you've just had clarified, is now going to be on the 15th of January. You will receive a diary entry around that in an email, and the one after that, as Hazel's just explained, on the 30th. So we'll have a busy January, and in the meantime, I'm sure you'll have a busy end of November and December too. So in the meantime, before we get into the new year, have a good finish to this year, and look forward to seeing you all in due course. Thank you very much indeed. Meeting is now closed.